Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Rocky Mountain Partnership Town Hall. We're really excited about having this conversation on post-secondary credential attainment and ultimately achieving economic and social mobility for all. We have a great lineup today. We are streaming live and we are excited to bring you all together. So the agenda for this morning is we're going to go through some welcome and introductions, and then we're going to turn it over to a panel to really dive into what is impacting our community's ability to attain credentials. And then we're going to zero in on how you all can get involved and take action, and then we'll round it out with some action commitments. So what we hope you walk away with is really understanding how post-secondary credential attainment can be improved to help us achieve social and economic mobility for all. Learn about the work of the partnership to move the needle, and again, take home action items to move forward in your own sphere of influence and control. So thank you again for being here. Who's leading the conversations today? So my name is Becky Hoffman. I'm the CEO of the partnership, joined by Matthew LaCrue and Ryan Mccoy. And we have an amazing panel, which will be moderated by Peter Lafari with Joe Barella, Raymond Gonzalez, Dr. Tricia Johnson, Dr. Kim Post, Jenny Rogers, and Andrew Tucker. Again, thank you for joining us today. So I'm going to turn it over to our co-chair and county manager, Raymond Gonzalez, to really ground the conversation in the vision and mission of the partnership. Thanks, Ray.
Good morning, everyone. As Becky said, my name is Raymond Gonzalez, and I have the pleasure of serving as the county manager for the best county in the state of Colorado. As Becky said, I'm going to talk a little bit about the vision and the mission statement of the Rocky Mountain Partnership. And as you can see from the slide here, it really comes down to economic and social mobility for all community members. As a public servant, and I have about 20 years in local government, I have an ethical obligation to serve everyone in my community. And we take that to heart. And that's the whole point of Rocky Mountain Partnership, is really a cross-sector partnership of cross-sector private and nonprofit and local government coming together to really address the needs of our community. And as you can see, I basically almost read the mission statement verbatim, but it really is a coalition of cross-sector partners and stakeholders to really improve the economic and social mobility of our residents in Adams County. And how we do that is we utilize data to set shared targets and as a scorecard to measure the progress that we're making. And we advocate for realigning policies and funding to remove those barriers and to accelerate the progress, and to, at the end of the day, to better coordinate and improve what's working on the ground. And we are still facing this pandemic, and a perfect example that I could really give an example to and relate to is this COVID-19. When we started preparing to address the community needs, Adams County relied on Rocky Mountain Partnership to really serve as that neutral backbone, because they had this coalition of cross-sector partners already at the table. And so it was a win-win, and it was a huge success in terms of really addressing the needs of our community members. So I'm going to turn it over to Becky to continue on with the presentation. It's great to see everyone.
Thanks, Ray. So as usual, we start with data. And so how does this partnership hold itself accountable to see if economic and social mobility is moving? So we monitoring these indicators that most impact economic and social mobility, trending up or down. So first and foremost is, of course, the post-secondary credential attainment indicator. We want to see that trend in a positive direction. Self-sufficiency wage. We know that folks cannot live and work in the community if they're not making that self-sufficiency wage. And so that's something, it's an indicator that we're tracking. Poverty rates going down. It's really the underpinning community level indicator that helps us see if we're trending towards economic and social mobility. And last but not least is overall employment rates. So driving down just a little bit further, what is impacting economic and social mobility is really what we call data domains. These are where the opportunities exist for us to roll up our sleeves, set shared targets to be set as really the focus, and how this partnership can hold themselves accountable to that collective work for those most impacted. So those roll up to basic needs, health, mental health, social and criminal justice, education and training, and of course, economic and workforce development. So where are we starting? So the network sets shared targets known to most impact economic and social mobility. And so excited to be joined by our partners from the Colorado Department of Higher Ed today to talk about where the RMP has initially set our target. So by the year 2025 is an N of 193,000 more individuals in the Adams and Broomfield region will have that post-secondary certificate and or degree. We know that this will be an increase of 45,800 people in the next 5 years. And how that lines up, again, with our partners at the Colorado Department of Higher Ed, that their goal by the year 2025 is 66% of Coloradoans aged 25 to 34. Just want to call out the partners and leaders of this partnership were really clear that we were looking at all adults in our partnership, where Colorado Department of Higher Ed is looking at 25 to 34. So just calling out that there's a discrepancy in the data that we're looking at. Not differentiator is the word I should be using. So where is the region currently? So this is our baseline data. So when we look at Adams County, you can see that we're at 34% as our current state, where Broomfield is at 66. And so again, the goal of the Rocky Mountain Partnership is to hit 50% by the year 2025. And disaggregating the data, when we look at who is most impacted and really where the opportunity lies for this partnership to focus, is when we disaggregate this data by race and ethnicity. And so sobering, we have a lot of work to do. With our Hispanic Latino population, their current state is around 10%. American Indian, Alaska Native alone, 19%. And you can see the white population at 34%. So I'm now going to turn it over to Peter Lafari, one of the champions of this work, who's going to really dive now into the panel discussion. So take it away, Peter.
Thank you, Becky. Appreciate it. It is an honor and pleasure to be here today with this distinguished panel. And I want to thank the Rocky Mountain Cradle to Career leadership team for inviting me and for this important topic. Today, I wanted to introduce everyone to our panel, and I'm going to start off with Joe Barella. Joe serves as Executive Director for Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Ray Gonzalez serves as County Manager here in Adams County, and he is the Rocky Mountain Partnership Steering Committee Co-Chair and Economics and Workforce Co-Champion. We have Dr. Tricia Johnson. She's the Vice President from the Westminster campus from Front Range Community College, and she's also the RMP Education and Training Co-Champion. We have Dr. Kim Post, Chief Student Success and Academic Affairs Officer for Colorado Department of Higher Education. Jenny Rogers, Vice President and Market Leader for Enterprise Community Partners. And Andrew Tucker, Director of Postsecondary Readiness, Colorado Department of Education. I'm Peter Lafari. I serve as Executive Director for Maker Housing Partners. We're the Housing Authority of Adams County. We own, operate, and develop multifamily affordable housing throughout Adams County. It's just a pleasure to be here talking about such important topics that impact our entire community. And so we're going to jump right in. And we're going to address our first question on economic impact to Joe Barella and Ray Gonzalez. And I think I'll ask Joe to go first here. And so, Joe, the data is clear that a person who's able to earn a credential makes a higher wage to support themselves and their families. When folks are attaining a credential, what is the impact on the economy and how does it benefit the larger community?
Thank you, Peter. It's an honor to be with you all today and discuss what is so important and how we as Coloradans can address the need that everyone needs to prosper through their education attainment and their work so that they can choose to live and live comfortably in the communities that they call home here in Colorado. So undoubtedly, we know that low-wage workers comprise a substantial share of the workforce here in the northern metro area, but in Colorado as a whole. According to a recent Brookings report, more than 53 million people, or 44% of all workers aged 18 to 64 in the United States, earn low hourly wages, and that would be considered probably around $16 an hour. And so we need to really look at in our communities, how can we impact that? And we know that if people have a credential, and it's good to point out, we're talking about post-secondary credentials. And, it's great if it's a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, but we're looking at industry recognized credentials. What are those certificate programs or trainings that make someone more employable or relevant to their current jobs or maybe jobs of the future? So we know that 77% of low-wage workers have some college or less. And so how can we direct that education to either completing a credential, a college degree, or make it relevant to what is needed in our economic environments? And, in the Metro Denver area, we know that we have a big commuting workforce. And so when we look at what growing industries, we're fortunate that in the Denver area, we have many industries that are growing. And so you can look outside your county and choose to live in Adams County, but choose to work maybe in Denver County or in Boulder County, Broomfield County. So that opens up the range of where we can put those talents and skills to work and maybe look at how an input could help you. At the Department of Labor, we've been really focusing on reskilling, upskilling, and next skilling. We really think that all workers, if you're in the workforce or out of the workforce, you need to make sure that you're looking at that. How am I upping my game so that I'm relevant to the job I have today, the job I want tomorrow, or the job that I may have to move into in the future? We know that people of color are disproportionately impacted by the lack of a post-secondary credential. And so here at the Department of Labor and with our partners at other state agencies, we're really looking at how we can make sure that we don't separate learning from earning. In the future, we need to make sure that people have the opportunity to upskill, get a credential while they're working. I don't think we have the luxury anymore to separate the two. And so we need to look at ways that people can access either virtually, on the job, or a combination of on campus and at work, where businesses support their workforce's upskilling. We know that the attainment needs to be driven by the demand in the area. No longer do we have the luxury of training and pray that our inputs through learning and education is going to lead to a job. I think I would encourage most people that if they don't have access to a career coach, that they actually go into a public workforce center, a community college, a 4-year institution, and talk to a career coach and put some strategy into your upskilling. It needs to be relevant to what's moving ahead as far as the world of work and how you can make sure your experience, the skills you have, and maybe the skills that you need to obtain lead to a viable career path that has more opportunities for a livable wage and prosperity.
Well, Joe, there's a couple of things I want to loop back because I think they're very important that you said that perhaps we could tweet out as a partnership that'll stick with us. This idea of don't separate learning from earning, this idea of reskilling, upskilling, next skilling, all of these elements that are essential to individuals to be resilient and persevere through the inherent ups and downs, right? I think it starts with believing that everyone has a place at the table in Adams County and Colorado, regardless of their background and their personal story. It's so exciting to be here today to talk about this. I'm going to give it to Ray in a second, but in a couple of words, the public perception versus reality has plagued us in this space, right? This idea that if you don't have a 4-year degree, you're something less than an individual that has a trade and a skill. Is that changing? And if so, is it changing fast enough?
It is changing, and thanks to the work from the Colorado Department of Higher Education, the Colorado Department of Education, and the Department of Labor, we're really looking at how can we make sure that there's not a better than and less than choice when people look at upskilling. Employment needs to be tied to learning, and learning can happen in academic settings. It also can happen on the job. And so we need to make sure that we build pathways for people, that one is not greater than the other, that people can access career success through their upskilling on the job and in academic settings, or a combination of both. And so we're really looking at the professional opportunities where people can upskill, get their education training that leads to something that's stackable, and that there is, a crosswalk between the two. Someone who has an academic degree can enter into employment. Someone who has a professional earned credential and can lead to a degree, so that there is benefits to both types of learning. We know that disproportionately our people of color, people with disability, our new American populations are having a hard time finishing high school. We need to have that happen first, and then connect that learning while they're in high school to a career path that could involve enrolling at a community college or a four-year institution, but also could involve going to an apprenticeship program in the trades, construction, or even professional apprenticeship programs. So I know that wasn't a few words, but I'm sure I'll have an opportunity to talk more about that later, Peter. Thank you.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. And Ray, a couple of seconds for you to talk about the importance of what's happening here in Adams County.
Absolutely. Thanks, Peter. It's great to see you, Joe. At the end of the day, Peter, this region needs talent with the skills and credentials needed to attract and retain the primary employers needed to really continue and improve the economy and quality of life for the residents here in this region. Equally as important to this is the need for individuals, our most vulnerable community members, to have the skills that they need to earn the wages to enable them to take care of their families. This is not and cannot be a focus for only higher education or workforce. This is a collective priority across sectors, including for local government. Our primary businesses depend on this and depend on us to pull together as a collective partnership. This is why I personally have committed to this vision and mission approach from the Rocky Mountain Partnership, because what I hear a lot about, Peter, is there's so much work underway already, and there is, but it continues to be in silos. And it's not coordinated, and we have to pull together to make sure that we're serving the community the best way we can. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Ray. And that's the beauty of the partnership, is the active breaking down of those silos based off of a common pull towards a generational impact of goodness. I would like to take this time to now direct my next question to Dr. Kim Post. And this is going to really focus on alignment with the state. So, this region has come together to support the economic and social mobility of all of our community members, as shared by Ray at the beginning of today's conversation. The work happening here is directly aligned with the state's master plan around credential attainment. Why is Adams County and the region so critical to the state of Colorado?
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I really appreciate the work that that you all are doing. Certainly, what we know is that when we have communities in mass that are working towards a common goal, that lifts the entire state up. And so, thank you so much for that. I wanted to touch on a couple of things in terms of how the state is aligned to the work that you are doing. As Becky had mentioned earlier before, our goal is to ensure that we have an attainment rate of at least 66% by the year 2025. We are not at by any means close to that yet. And then certainly looking at the disparities between our communities of color and our low-income students to make sure that we are moving that needle as much as we can. And we have, over time, it used to be that, we were a department that was focused on a bachelor's, associates, a bachelor's degree or up. And we have been over the last several years really looking at how credentials can stack into one another into meaningful trajectories for students. As many folks have mentioned before, there is a huge difference between someone with no credential and the lifetime earnings of those with some credential. We know that having a credential of some kind decreases the likelihood that an individual will rely on social safety nets. We know that over time the earning potential of individuals increases exponentially. We know that we see a decrease in, I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry. Let me just talk a little bit about some of the things that we're currently working on right now. Sorry about that.
Not a problem.
We think as when we're looking at the ways in which we look at credentials now, as opposed to what we looked at in previous generations, how do we connect work-based learning into college credentials and our attainment goal? And I wanted to just touch a little bit on this idea of stackable credentials. And I've talked about this in many times before, and Tricia's gonna, Dr. Johnson's this is gonna sound very familiar, but there's a model out there with Mccoy Resource Center in the Earn to Learn program that I just wanna highlight as one of our best practices. And if we were to look at a state at modeling what really works, this Community College of Aurora, Metropolitan State University of Denver, and Mccoy Resource Center developed a stackable credential model where individuals, participants of Mccoy would be able to work and also earn stackable credentials, whether it was a certificate, an associate's degree. And I think there was something like 16 to 17 different pathways that an individual could have on-ramps and off-ramps into as they were moving through their degree or credential program. And that's a model that we want to be able to replicate throughout the state. It's something that embeds work-based learning into a livable wage and then opportunities for advancement as we're moving forward. So we think something like that is really important. We also love the idea of incorporating apprenticeships into work-based learning opportunities for college credit. We're currently working on an implementation of a bill that was passed in the last legislative session. And I will note also that, when we were going through the pandemic at the very beginning, one of the requirements for getting bills passed in the state was that we had to strip all kinds of fiscal notes out of everything that we did. But because we believed that work-based learning for college credit was so important and that all learning counts, we were able to take away any kind of fiscal note and then rely on grants and gifts in order to make this happen. So what that bill will do is it'll enable the state to have a menu of workplace certificates and credentials that will be able to stack into transferable credentials across the state. So we're really excited about that. We're in the kind of study phase of that now. We look forward to releasing information on how that will work a little bit later this year.
Thank you, Dr. Post.
Absolutely.
A couple of things I want to just go ahead and loop it back on is this idea of stackable credentials, and then the shout out for Mccoy, which is a pioneer in meeting people where they are, right, mm-hmm. and doing so with dignity, warmth, and grace. And I just think that there's so much to be learned from there. And so hopefully our viewers, if they're unfamiliar with Mccoy, they check them out and dig into some of the very important elements that you just shared. I'm going to now go to Andy, and I'm going to ask Andy about policy needs. So Andy Tucker, in addition to coordinating work on the ground, there's a huge opportunity to align policy and funding to support learners on this pathway. Can you share where you see opportunity to shift policy to close gaps in attainment? And then, what policies are already in place that we're seeing have a positive impact on said attainment? Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Peter, and thank you so much for inviting me to be here today. I'm honored to be on this panel with such distinguished members. There's a lot of great stuff happening, and there's still a lot of opportunity. I think one of the big opportunities that exists that you mentioned a little bit there a few minutes ago, Peter, was around kind of the, the way that we talk about credential attainment in general. I think that K-12, and I represent K-12 education, the Colorado Department of Education, and I think that for generations now, we've been talking about that every student should be college bound. And while earning some level of post-secondary credential, as we're talking about today, is vital and incredibly important, the goal of K-12 education should not be to get kids to college. The goal of K-12 education should be to prepare students for careers. College is a great pathway for many, many students on the pathway to their career, but it's a stop on that pathway. So development of those pathways is where I think the real opportunity lies, in really helping students to understand where it is and how to get from where they are to where they want to go. As a result, there are some policies that we have in K-12 right now that are really working towards that. And I'm going to talk about 3 specifically. The first one is, they're called individual career. It's the individual career and academic planning process. And what that is, it's a piece of legislation that requires that each student, at least in grades 9 through 12, have access to a career and academic planning process in their school. So that's at an individual level. So to help students really understand, this is where I am, these are my wants, my needs, my desires, my strengths. This is the types of career path it could lead to, and here's what I need to do academically in order to get there. And it's a work in progress, to be completely honest, and but it is something that really can help to individualize education. The ICAP process is the first step towards another piece of policy I'm going to talk about, and that is our new graduation guidelines that are going into effect. They were to go into effect for the class of 2021. Due to the pandemic, full implementation will be for the class of 2022. But it's the first time that Colorado has had state-level graduation requirements. Interestingly, as you look into them, you'll learn that it's not the typical graduation requirements that we're used to. It's not the 4 years of English and 4 years of math and 3 years of social studies and 3 years of science that we're used to in K-12 and that most school districts have as their graduation requirements. What it is it's much more of a pathway model. Let's have students demonstrate their knowledge, demonstrate their career and college readiness through one of 11 different means. Some of those are national assessments like the SAT and the ACT, but others are things like, did you earn an industry recognized credential while you were in high school? If so, and you have one of those while you've earned one of those, right? It means that you're career ready because you have an industry recognized credential in hand. So what this policy does is it really incentivizes, or it encourages schools and districts to begin to look at providing additional opportunities for students. One of those opportunities, my last point, Peter, one of those opportunities is another program that has been incredibly successful in recent years, and it's called the Career Development Incentive Program. And what this program does is it incentivizes schools and districts and for every student who earns an industry recognized credential, a high value, high demand industry recognized credential while in high school, as determined by the Colorado Workforce Development Center. For every one of those credentials that a student earns, a school can receive up to $1,000 incentive. So many schools are getting thousands upon thousands of dollars to help to continue to build these types of programs to really support students' career development while in K-12. There are other policies that I could talk about, and I could talk about this all day, but I'll stop there for now because
Andy, thank you so much. I mean, this might be a bookmark or placeholder for another conversation, but there's a leadership journey story embedded in what you just shared. How did you get this shift to happen, right? There's a lot of entrenchment that it sounds like there was movement on. Perhaps that's a question we could segue to Dr. Post as well. But there's something there that I think is important to our collaborative. And then I also just want to say, I love that idea of pathways, prepare students for careers, where you are to where you desire to go. It feels human, right? It feels natural. It allows for mistake. It feels like so many of our BIPOC community members are not afforded the grace and luxury of a mistake. Right, I can, as a white privileged male, make a mistake in my younger years and rebound from that because of the supports. And so, what I love that's embedded in that is this idea that you're many things as an individual, and we evolve over time. And so, such a power in there. Maybe just a comment about leadership, and then I'm going to give it to Dr. Post and ask her to talk about the question and comments as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is definitely a paradigm shift to move from career bound to from college bound to career bound. There's no question, and to say that is fully entrenched and that everyone that we've made that really clear yet is not true. I mean, it is still it's evolving because we have decades of entrenched belief. So a lot of this is about really individualizing education and helping people to understand how this is going to serve students extraordinarily well. It's going to still lead students to college, to colleges, both 2 and 4 year, but it's also going to really help support that post-secondary credential attainment. So I'll stop there. Kim.
Thank you, Andy. Dr. Post?
Yeah, it's such a great point about, leadership mattering. And in 2008, there was this landmark legislation that passed called Senate Bill, CAP for K, Senate Bill 2012, which really required that the Department of Education, the Department of Higher Education work collaboratively together to really rethink what graduation looked like, in particular, what our remediation rates were looking like, and it was at that time that, folks sat around the table and sort of negotiated what pathways looked like. It was the first time that we had really started considering that, yes, students needed to have multiple opportunities to demonstrate readiness, but that also that there should be some intentional planning and career advisement that took place over that period of time. And what's remarkable to me is that at that time is when it called for new graduation requirements, and it's 2021 now, and we're just starting to really implement that. But I think since that time, there's really been this landmark culture shift about what it means to be ready in Colorado, and less dependence on standardized testing as the only way to do this. And I remember sitting in a room with our friends from CDE thinking about what a qualified career credential looked like in order to have those things count as relevant to a student's education. So, we've been on this journey for a long time. And I always say that policy making in a state like this is a very long game. And so, to see this come to fruition right now is really exciting. And I think what it's really done is really amped up the excitement and the opportunity to really look expansively beyond what we've traditionally looked at over the past.
It's a longitudinal game. Talking to a Hauser who's used to a 3-year timeline for community development, in the best of times, a 5-year average window in the average of times. To hear that longitudinal journey makes me feel like I'm not alone in this long game. So, but really important comments there, Dr. Post. Thank you. I'm going to go to 1 second here. I'm going to go to, let's see, Dr. Tricia, and we're going to talk about policy. So let's see here. Oh, excuse me. Coordination of work on the ground. So Dr. Tricia, many organizations, including FRCC, are already doing tremendous work around mitigating barriers learners face and coordinating with one another to achieve them. Can you speak to what work is already underway and how the work through the Rocky Mountain Partnership is taking that coordination to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. And this a great group to be with, because we engage in these conversations so often, and it's just nice to have the space to really talk about what it means and what the next steps are. So I just want to start off and go what shared about the importance of advocating within our silos, and you'll hear happening on the ground. And ultimately, what it comes down to are essential partnerships, recognizing that we have to be creative and work together if we're going to truly serve our community. So, starting out, we've been talking about pathways. One example of this are pathways in technology, early college, high schools, PTECs, if you're not familiar with those. And they are phenomenal. These are partnerships with our P12 partners and with industry. And it's a way to ensure that we're really thinking about that growth and those stackable credentials. And so, a couple of examples are here within the local. We have partnership with Advocate 12. I schools and with 14 school districts to try to put these in place. And these are programs that maximize concurrent enrollment while students are in high school and help those students get a degree at no cost to the family. So this is huge. It took really getting creative and figuring out how do you do this in a way, maximizing and leveraging dollars to support the community in a meaningful way. And like Joe mentioned earlier, commitment to apprenticeship, work-based learning, and that meaningful collaboration between workforce, employers, and post-secondary providers, and just to make sure we're thinking differently about how we function and ensuring that folks are getting into those jobs, because just like Andy said, it's about careers, right? We are not the ending spot for anyone. We want to help them be able to advance. And then ultimately also from the higher ed world, looking at access, and so this has to do with implications from policy, for which we're really grateful. Looking at helping those workforce translate their work experiences, whether that's the industry recognized credentials, like Andy was talking about, or work experiences, and turning that into college credit, not having people start from scratch, recognizing that they don't come in as an empty slate, and then they stack those credentials and advance their careers. Those are some things that are happening. Finally, I could not speak enough about the changes that we're seeing in terms of the approach to developmental education. Moving away from relying on a test and instead engaging in meaningful conversation about experience and comfort with math and writing, and realizing that our adults are using these skills in an applied way every single day. And how do we adjust as we get students, get our adults in our community into their degree or certificate programs as quickly as possible? And this is really important because just a moment ago, Peter, you talked about the implication on communities of color, and developmental education is impacting at substantially higher rates our communities of color than anyone else. So we have to look at that differently. We have to really challenge that.
Dr. Tricia, I can just, the passion emanates from your Zoom today. I just thank you so much. I can tell that you wake up inspired to tackle these challenges and give the gift of hope and opportunity to our community members. A couple things you talked about that really strike me: concurrent synergies, right, that try to meet folks where they are in a low to no cost environment, and then that vulnerability and trust, right? Because for anyone, to be able to say, I need help, right? Or this is an area that I don't feel comfortable in, is letting down the armor that we put in front of ourselves in an attempt to stay safe, right? And so it's just so exciting that Front Range Community College is taking this humanist approach to meet our Adams County community members where they are and invest in their gifts and talents as they present themselves. Just fantastic. I'm going to hand it over to Jenny Rogers. I know that Enterprise is doing a lot of work as a hub, as an anchor to bring together synergistic segments of our economy, of our public service entities, to be able to continue to bring down these silos. Jenny, can you share your viewpoint on this important topic?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it. And I am the kind of an outsider here. I'm not in the education field, but I'm in one of the sectors that really aligns with and serves your participants and your students, and that is affordable housing. And so I think it's really important as we think about coordination of work on the ground to think about coordination and cross-sector partnerships. And that includes the housing sector, the affordable housing sector, those who are providing mental health services, food, health, and other services that are going to really wrap participants, kids, parents, and families so that they can really continue on their education journey. And so I think it's really important for us to think about how we work together and not in silos to make sure that families have what they need so that they can take advantage of all of these amazing opportunities that you all are describing. And that includes working with partners such as Maker and Peter's organizations, other nonprofits that really have the resources or could provide the resources to those residents. So what does that look like? That could be working with housing providers who have space for educational programming in their buildings, working with housing providers and other service providers who know their residents because they're providing resident services. They're providing services to kids and, even pre-K kids in their journey in preschool. And so they really know their residents. They can hook residents up to programs if they are available, and I think really make connections. There are some great models out there of programs like providing housing for students in community college who may be homeless or may need housing supports. And we know at Enterprise, we have been launching education and housing partnerships across the country through our economic mobility programs and economic self-sufficiency programs, that if a household doesn't have a stable place to live, if they don't know where they're going to get food, if they don't have stable childcare, they won't be able to participate in any of these post-secondary programs. And so it's really important to make sure that we have those cross-sector partnerships. I just would like to point out that some of the reasons that that's really important are that, like in Colorado, if you have a family that is making $55,000 or less per year, they can't afford the regular 2-bedroom apartment rent in our state. And so if you're making minimum wage, if you're making $15 an hour, your family is not going to be able to afford the place that you live. You're going to need to live in subsidized housing, and you should be looking at ways to increase your household's income. And so it's really important to make sure that people have stable housing and support services so that they can take advantage of educational opportunities. It's also important for our housing providers to think about ways that we can support residents in their educational journey so that they have the opportunity to move into homeownership, if they have the opportunity to increase their income and move out of a subsidized unit. It's also a great way for us to be able to reduce the need for affordable housing. We have right now 1 unit for every 4 households in Colorado that needs them. And so there are not enough housing units for those in need who make lower incomes. And the economic mobility opportunities for households are really key. And of course, education is the key to that movement.
Thank you, Jenny. I was going to ask you about wraparound services next. You actually answered that question in real time. I just think, as you chat, right, this idea, Dr. Richard Rothstein, a tremendous researcher, author around his book called Color of Law, kind of the history of race and housing. He talks about how, if you're a young child and you're having trouble sleeping in your home because there may be toxic mold or rodent infestation and you have asthma, how are you going to be able to go to school and compete? Right? It's hard enough to be a young person and to tackle the challenges of an educational journey. And so if you're living in your car, if you're multiply evicted and you have no place to call home, not only is it that you're tired, you're scared, you're hungry, but you're also questioning whether or not this world has a place at the table for you. And so when you have that foundational need met, it's a force multiplier for all of our work. And I think that what we're hearing and what I'm hearing from you is that this cross-sector synergy, this cross-pollination isn't just a nice thing, it's a required thing. And we have the tools now to know that we can come together like Optimus Prime, to use a Transformer reference, and be better than our individual parts as a whole. So thank you, Jenny, for that. I'm going to go next to Ray, and I'm going to ask Ray about equitable hiring. I'm a little kind of spoiled to know Ray and work very closely with Ray and know just how hard he pushes in this space directly as a thought leader. Ray, I'd like to ask you around organizational policy and its impacts on individuals' ability to attain a credential. A lot of organizations talk about equity, and hiring is one way to achieve this, but maybe the needle's not moving quickly enough. A little quick side note here is Rocky Mountain Partnership is excited to announce we're building an equitable hiring toolkit, and working to help businesses implement the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act. I'd like for folks to keep an eye out for that. It'll be coming. But I'm going to hand it to you and ask you, what have you done to move the needle on equitable hiring? And I'll give you the mic, Ray.
Thanks, Peter. What a great question. I am very proud of the work we are doing to help drive equity in hiring. And I'll even take it one step further, equity in compensation. Specifically in Adams County, this has been a priority for me and our Board of County Commissioners. Since 2017, when I was named county manager, we have made a huge effort to shift the internal demographics of our organization to mirror our external demographics. And what I mean by that is we have 40% Latino population in Adams County. And when you measure and you look at the data and you look at who is working in Adams County, we are closer to that 40%. And we are very close to mirroring our external demographics, but that has taken us a while to get there. And we've been at this since 2017. Some of you know me and work well with me and have known me for a long time, that I am not your traditional county manager or your public administrator. I look at things a little different and from a different lens. And in particular, in 2017, when I was named county manager, I took a different approach to human resources. I established a people and culture core service area, and I am now fortunate to have two very talented professionals who are driving this work in Adams County for us. Debbie Hirty is our Director of Culture and Workplace Excellence, and she focuses on talent attraction, diversity, equity, and inclusivity, and learning development for our employees. A lot of the panelists here today were talking about the importance of credentials. We require every employee in our organization to take either 30 continuing education courses or up to 90, depending on what job classification you have. And this is per year. I am proud to say we are a learning organization. And so we strive to really train, retrain, and give the skills to our employees so that they are successful in terms of serving our community. The other director that helps lead this effort is our Director of People and Total Rewards Excellence. And of course, she focuses on your traditional HR functions, employee relations, wellness, and compensation. But I'm going to give you a perfect example, or an example of the work that we have done since then. And that is in 2019, we conducted a pay equity study to take a closer look at compensation and how we were paying across all of our jobs. And while I'm proud we were above national benchmarks in this space, we still found that we paid people of color and women lower than white males who had similar credentials. And so I am proud to say our Board of County Commissioners supported our action plan that addressed those discrepancies. And since then, we have put in place a very strategic compensation philosophy that will help us prevent us from getting in this space again in the future. And so that is just, I just wanted to kind of express how important it is as leaders who are listening here. It takes strong leadership to make this happen. And I am very fortunate to have the support of 5 county commissioners to help support this work that we are doing to drive the change that is necessary to address this issue.
Ray, I just want to applaud your vulnerability and transparency. At times, we feel that we're penalized for exhibiting such traits, but what we know is the greatest teams in America, greatest organizations live and breathe vulnerability and transparency. And so, I just applaud you for that. And leadership matters. And if not the county, then who? So that can echo throughout our halls of leadership, halls of organization, our get-togethering places to say, we can do this if we take a look internally and decide that we want to change for the best. And so thank you for that. I'm going to give it to Joe and ask Joe if he has some thoughts from the state level that he can share with us.
Thank you, Peter and Ray. Great job in Adams County. I do think if more public and private sector employers really valued how important it is that the workforce have the skills that they need to do the jobs of today and the future. So many of the workers that we currently have are mid-career professionals who don't have access to stop working and go to school full-time to get a credential full-time. And so more employers need to start offering upskilling, reskilling, next skilling to their current employees so that they have employees that meet their needs and workforce demands of the future. So I think pay equity is a great opportunity to step back and make sure, as we look at recruitment, retention, that we're looking at all factors that make people want to stay with a company or the government sector as an employee. And it's not just pay, but it's access to flexible arrangements for work-life balance. It's access to paid sick leave. Luckily, Colorado, through Prop 118, in 3 years, we'll have a paid family and medical leave program that will be available to all workers in Colorado. So I think we need to look at, pay structures that offer livable wages in their communities that people choose to live in, but also what are the benefit packages that include things as paid leave, time off, but also professional development. As an employee, what does my company offer on the job or through other opportunities to make sure that I have the skills to be relevant in my current position, or to look at a career trajectory or promotional pathway within that company or within that industry. So thank you for the work you're doing. I think more companies, more government sector employers need to look at Adams County as a role model in how we support our employees.
Thank you, Joe. And we do have some questions coming in. I want to start, and I can put this out. We'll see, maybe the panelists raise your hand or just jump and grab it. So one of the questions is how can we help individuals pay for education? Finances are a barrier. And then, and then 1A to that is, how can we increase access for Spanish-speaking households? So is there anyone from the panel that would like to take a stab at this one first? I think I saw Dr. Post.
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the programs that we run out of the department is the Colorado Opportunity Scholarship Initiative, and there's several different streams to that right now. So certainly, funding in terms of scholarship opportunities for students at the college, which includes a technical college all the way up through. And what's neat about that program is that it also combines wraparound support services for students, so they're getting connected to somebody that can be of assistance to them along their journey. The other thing in terms of COSI is we are launching a couple of different initiatives. So one is a displaced workers project where we're providing specific funding for folks that have been unemployed or underemployed in order to get them back into not just a college, a post-secondary pathway, but also a workforce pathway. And then we're also going to be looking at, if it passes through the legislature, a significant amount of money that will help institutions sort of build capacity and then also help individuals complete short-term credentials. I think those three different streams are something that are currently in place and or currently trying to build. The other thing that I'll note is that Adams County with RMP is working on a pay for success model for being able to fund higher education initiatives. This is not student-centered, but it does provide institutions an opportunity to get incentive funding for specific outcomes that are not necessarily tied to our original funding formula. So that's another thing. And then I think Andy has some other opportunities as well. Before I forget, also we're contemplating launching a project that will provide a statewide solution for ESL training for institutions of higher education, particularly for new Americans. We'll see where that goes. It's sort of in the mix right now, but our dream would be that institutions won't have to fund ESL training, that there'll be a statewide platform that folks can leverage. We're going to focus that work on some of our apprenticeship programs, particularly in health and in information technology, I think, as a start. So working with the New Americans folks at the state of Colorado.
Thank you, Dr. Post. I'm going to go to Andy and then Ray next.
Yeah, I think another program that I want to make sure that everyone's aware of that really helps with affordability is Concurrent Enrollment. concurrent enrollment, Tricia talked about this as well. Concurrent enrollment is a program that allows students who are in K-12, typically high school students, to take college courses while in high school. They're tuition free to students and families. So it is an incredible opportunity. Now, I will note that they're tuition free. There may be some fees for books and other fees, but these courses are tuition free. Front Range is one of many partners. All the community colleges and many four-year institutions also participate in the concurrent enrollment program in Adams County, Adams 12 school district, and Adams 14, and others are very involved with concurrent enrollment. Approximately 35% of high school students take at least one concurrent enrollment class while they're in high school. So at this stage, and it's growing continually. So we would love to see more and more students do that.
Thanks, Sandy. Ray, and then Joe.
Yeah, this was briefly mentioned, but I do have to applaud our Board of County Commissioners for supporting this partnership with the Colorado Department of Higher Ed, and that is the Finish What You Started pilot program. It's a 2-year pilot program, and our board last week approved using retail marijuana funds. As most of you know, that our county commissioners went to the voters several years ago and asked for a 3% retail sales tax on marijuana, and the voters approved it. And our board, 100% of those funds support education. And so since 2016, we have provided almost full ride scholarships to low income youth in Adams County through a partnership through Colorado Department of Higher Ed, COSI dollars. And so we will continue to support this. This is a priority for our county commissioners. And this is yet another example of how we're realigning our funding to really drive the work in the community.
Thank you, Ray. We'll go to Joe next.
Thank you, Peter. I just wanted to add on there, current legislation actually going to hearing this week is a $25 million stimulus for workforce development that will go to local workforce boards to really work with COVID impacted long-term unemployed. And so this will go out to workforce boards to meet the needs in their community for reskilling, upskilling, and next skilling. They're primarily service industry workforce that continues to be long-term unemployed. And so we're hoping that that will be used to meet the needs in their community. It does offer an opportunity for local workforce boards to work with community-based organizations to meet everyone in their area. So a lot of times people don't walk into a workforce center or don't walk into a community college, maybe going into a nonprofit or a food bank and partner with them to make sure that people are aware that there's opportunities for no-cost training, opportunities that involve standalone training or learn-earn models where they can earn and learn. I also want to give a plug for in-school youth apprenticeship programs. We are really looking at how we can encourage parents and students to look at the apprenticeship programs, not only in the trades or construction industry, very important and very relevant, but also the professional services industry. There are many more opportunities for young kids to, as they're juniors and seniors in high school, to spend some of the time in the academic world or in a school, but also spend a good portion of their time in a business learning hands-on the professional experiential learning and skills that are needed to be successful in a career path. So I just want to make sure there's a plug for that. The $25 stimulus money that's coming out does not have any eligibility requirements. It just is asking to look at households that are impacted with unemployment by the COVID. So unlike WIOA dollars that come in, there's no restrictions on eligibility. So at this point in time, hopefully in May or June, people can access those through the Public Workforce Center and look at upskilling. So I want to put that out there.
Thank you, Joe. So much important information embedded in your response, as well as everyone that replied. Lysandra from the Backbone team, is reminding me to share that this isn't just about higher ed and education. This is about attaining of skills in jobs and careers that you love. So that you get from that dream to reality, as we shared earlier, and it's been so beautifully illuminated. There is no right way, there is only your way, and your way is important because you are important. So, ultimately, thank you, Lysandra, for reminding me about that. What we don't want to do is have a divide culturally around this. This is really about us, a community of Adams County coming together to invest in individuals' time and talent, and that what makes them unique is what we celebrate. And that could be in any of the sectors, as long as we're walking together through a continuous improvement journey and celebrating our wins and where we've come from. So now I'm going to kind of maybe go to a little bit more of a hot seat here, and this is going to be to any panelist. The data shows huge disparities in attainment for different populations, most notably affecting young men of color. When looking at the overall target and how it impacts social and economic mobility, why is it critical to be looking at disaggregation of data by gender, race, ethnicity, socioeconomic status, zip code, etc., to shift systems so inequities aren't perpetuated? And I'll stay here. Poverty is systemic, right? In America, we like to lay blame and shame and say it's because you're not working hard enough, or you made too many bad decisions. That doesn't impact me. But what we know is that poverty is systemic, and there is no such thing as a welfare king or a welfare queen, and the other tropes that are perpetuated to divide and to shame and blame and really crush our spirit. And so in that regard, there's a freeing element when you say that there's system level dynamics that are driving these outcomes, and we can change that because we are the decision makers. And taking, as I mentioned earlier, that privilege that I carry as a second generation American, it is not lost on me that the color of my skin has allowed my family and I to assimilate. Other BIPOC groups are not afforded the same opportunity, often through violence, intimidation, and extensive opposition in all public forums. And so this is probably our most important question, which is why we saved it for last. And if I could see a hand of the panelists that would like to perhaps jump into the pool and swim in this water with us for a bit and talk on this important topic. Jenny, I saw your hand come up first. I'll hand it to you. And then I see Dr. Tricia.
Thanks, Peter. This is a topic that's really dear to my heart and my work, and especially coming out of the housing industry, to be frank. As Peter knows, even the public housing industry and the federal government were part of that historic discrimination that has led to the pattern of development in our country, that has led to the neighborhoods that people live in, which has led to opportunity that many barriers to opportunity in many systems. As we know in America today, 34% of white Americans over the age of 25 hold a bachelor's degree or higher, those who are white, compared to 24% who are Black. And that discrimination really carries forward. So when you look at home ownership rates, 24% of Black adults own a home and 73% of white households own a home. Your housing stability, your stability in America is tied to your opportunity, and that includes educational opportunities. And so I think we really have to dig in and target underrepresented individuals, BIPOC households, those that may be harder to serve in our communities. And we need to come up with strategies that find those cross-sector collaborations, find the communities that have been traditionally underserved, and create new strategies with those communities as well. I think it's really important to elevate the fact that communities need to help create the solutions for themselves. And we find that they are more likely to participate and benefit from and be successful in systems that they co-create. And so I think this is our chance to undo some of these systematic discriminatory practices and do the right thing now.
Thank you, Jenny. I'm going to go to Dr. Tricia, then Ray, and I'm just going to say, we critique, as we talked about with Ray, not out of a position of hate, but out of a position of love, and that transparency and vulnerability is what drives positive change, because people feel seen and heard and then trusted. And then it's nothing about them without them. And I know that the partnership is working on this. And I do know there was a question about equity and inclusion when it comes to BIPOC community members. So I'll let Becky and the team share more about that later. Dr. Tricia, it's yours.
All right, so hopefully you can give me a thumbs up. My sound is better this time. Okay.
You do. You
Okay,
sound
good deal. Yeah, so I just want to say, I think that, in terms of the why, Peter, you asked about the why. You look at the data earlier, the rates of attainment of post-secondary credentials, the gap is unacceptable. And I just want to first start off by saying I really commend the state for taking this seriously. When you look at our Colorado Rises plan, not only does it say that we will have 66% of adults, but it says that we will have zero equity gap. And so with that, it really has institutions of higher education thinking deeply about what does this mean? Because we recognize that our system was designed by and for wealthy white people. That is what the higher education system is. And therefore, we have to step back and say, okay, how are the ways that we structure a classroom, the ways that we engage with service, being a disservice to some students while servicing others? And so for that, we are engaging in really meaningful conversation of, overall attainment, but even down to the micro level of doing training with faculty to look at student success outcomes at the individual level and recognizing what's my role as the practitioner. What messages might I be sending in the way that I design this classroom, the way that I design this lesson, and recognizing that I have a role to play in changing that, in democratizing that classroom, because those that are speaking and doing the engagement are the ones who are learning. And so we're really checking this in higher education and changing the way that we engage and recognizing that our students come to us, our community comes to us with inherent value, and we have to build that into the curriculum. So that's why, it is all of the years and years of systemic racism and bias within our system that we have to check and challenge in order to truly serve our community.
Thank you, Dr. Tricia. Ray.
I couldn't agree more with what she just stated. As a person of color, this is a huge priority for me. And I will tell you this, in 1980, I was an Adams County Head Start graduate, and I am now the county manager of Adams County. And so I am a success story. And we need to really pay attention to this. And I think, Dr. Johnson hit it on the nail, and that is we really have to take a different approach in terms of how we look at things. And you heard me loud and clear. I want to clarify our internal demographics. I mentioned Latino, but it's for everyone. We have a huge Asian population in Adams County, and we also have an African American population. We take our vision statement very seriously. We want to be the most inclusive and innovative county in America for all families and businesses. And so we really take that seriously. And I'm going to give you a different example around how we're really realizing that vision through COVID response and recovery. Our county commissioners have really partnered with the state of Colorado, the governor's office, to make sure that our vaccinations are going to people of color and high-risk neighborhoods. That is no different than what we're discussing today. And so we have made sure that we are prioritizing and strategically getting those vaccines in the arms of those that don't have access to healthcare. This conversation is very similar to what we're talking about. And so it just takes all of us coming together and taking a different approach in terms of how we're trying to make a difference in our community.
Thank you, Ray. Thank you, everyone. We have time for one last question from our viewers. And thank you to all the viewers that have posed a question. Your input is vital, and we appreciate it. Let's see, how do we define credential as part of this conversation? Folks feel like, oh, this is very focused on college or 2 to 4 year degrees. How do we define credential? Anyone want to share in on for the last question of the day?
Peter, I'll start. This is Joe, and I just want to make sure that's inclusive of a 4 year degree, an advanced degree, or even looking at a community college degree, but a credential in today's market means really an industry recognized credential. And so, a great initiative and our partner with Microsoft is their Global Skills Initiative, where they've made available globally their skill set portfolio. So people can go to Microsoft Global Skills Initiative and take online courses and get certified credentials that the business community is saying is essential to their functions. Crosswalk that over to LinkedIn and make sure that those credentials are viable in current job applications on LinkedIn. So, when we talk about recognized credential, we'd love it to be part of an academic program where you have stackable credentials that can lead up to an advanced degree, associate's degree, BA, or even further. But an industry recognized credential is really what we're talking about. What is something that makes you more relevant, that you can see listed on a job description, that you can say, hey, I have that, I completed that either on my own or through my work, and it was easy to obtain or very obtainable for everybody. So I just want to make sure it's bigger than I think what your comment or your question referenced.
Thank you, Joe. That's very important. I think folks seem to think, wow, I have to expend all this capital for this 4-year degree, and I'm not sure I'm going to get an ROI on that. What I just heard you say was, no, there's other options, short-term options that are highly desired by employers to demonstrate a candidate's commitment and to their continuous learning journey and their desire to bring those skills either to their current employer for opportunities for advancement, or to perhaps join a new employer and be able to provide their gifts and talents and be remunerated appropriately. So, well, I just want to thank the panel for your time today. There's been so many seeds planted of opportunity and inspiration. I'll go back. I'll see Dr. Post. Hopefully that dream becomes a reality with ESL being not required to be funded and have it just be kind of the standard operating procedure across our institutions. And just know that I've learned something from everyone today, and I just greatly appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. I'm going to give it back now to our moderator because I know we have more to share.
Ray, did you want to add something? Okay, no, we're good. Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Thank you so much, panelists. In a perfect world, we'd give you a round of applause. So extra credit for those that can find the emojicon clapper in real time. Okay, so the work underway. Where can we plug in policy and advocacy? And so where is the partnership really doubling down as we move forward? And so I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ryan Mccoy, who's going to bring our policy and advocacy work to life.
Yes, thank you, and thanks to the panel. Great, some thought leadership right there, and just the conversation that I wanted to continue on, but I know we're limited on time. But as you all saw, just the urgency behind their work, and it's because of that urgency we wanted to share more with you about what's already being done within RMP. I am one of the champions of the policy and legislative advisory networks, and I'm excited to share with you some of the specifics of the partnership's policy work that is currently underway. So the partnership engages policy work by identifying opportunities to shift policy and the funding along with it at the state and local and institutional levels. So again, and I think you've heard this throughout the presentation, our goal is ensuring that all of our policy work is running towards positively impacting social and economic mobility. So that's a theme you're going to continue, not just hear from us this year, but years to come. The plan started off this year by identifying 3 initial legislative priorities focused on the partnership's first global target, which was to increase post-secondary credential attainment. And as you can see in front of you on the slides, those are our 3 priorities that started our work. How this work has come to be, this work is done by the plan, our policy and legislative action network within the partnership. And our policy work has kicked into high gear this year, more so than years past. And I think a lot of it just has to do with the membership and the players at the table, specifically for the plan, because this is something we wanted to see things happening and we wanted to see action now. And so we continue to monitor most state legislation that has come in front of us, But I will tell you, we're identifying opportunities, and we're making sure that the right people, the stakeholders, are at the table for these conversations. One piece of legislation that we are supporting right now, as you can see, is House Bill 21-1222, which is the regulation of family, childcare, and homes. In addition, we are also holding meetings with our legislative delegation in our region to build stronger relationships and to just build that capacity of the work that needs to get done. As we continue to build state capacity, though, we are excited about the opportunity to work on local policy right now. We are and will be successful because of who we have around the table with us, both the plan and the entire partnership as a whole. We've identified several opportunities, as mentioned, to take action locally. For example, we are, as you heard from Peter earlier, we are working to build out an equitable hiring toolkit to ensure organizations within the partnership are practicing what we preach and aligning with our values. Becky's going to share a little bit more about that later on and how you can get involved. We are also working to determine how we can support local businesses to better implement the Equal Pay for Equal Work Act internally and determine how we can continue to build that act's intent to increase internal equity. On this next slide, what you will see here is how you can see an overall an overview of the process we use to engage our work. The big takeaway from this is that we're collaborating and finding opportunities and working together with a number of stakeholders, not just to change policy at the state level, but also to do it right here in our sweet home of Adams County. So with that said, I'd like to now pass this on to Dr. Tricia Johnson to share more about our work and the partnership and how it's engaging others.
Thanks so much, Ryan. So, as Ryan mentioned, there is other work being done by the partnership right now to help, achieve the shared target. So as co-champion for this work, I wanted to share more with you about it today so that you can know how you can get involved. So the infrastructure, really, about how all of this works. The work of the CAN is really building on previous work throughout the network. And within the CAN, there are several working groups called target action teams, and we're forming to really dig deeper into specific areas of the work to achieve that shared target through meaningful conversation of the work that's occurring on the ground throughout the region. A little bit more about these target action teams. Local, state, and national data and research tells us that the financial pieces, work status, income, availability of and access to credential opportunities that align with self-sufficient wage jobs, timely access to basic needs that would otherwise prevent participation in and completion of credential programs, and digital literacy and inclusion are the things most impacting this target. And so with that in mind, the partnership has done some thinking around the work that's needed to really address these factors. And they fall into the following areas, all of these target action teams. So to start off, coordinating those navigation services, navigators that we have present in so many organizations across the region, and ensuring that they are effective and accessible. Similarly, coordination of wraparound services, ensuring they are effective and accessible. I really want to, shout out a thought that Jody from the Workforce Center was talking with me about. We layer so often, and we need to integrate, not layer those wraparound services. Increasing the awareness of and access to and engagement in credential opportunities and the importance of those, which we've talked quite a bit about today. Re-enrolling adults with some training but no credential, and then helping them complete that credential. Making credentials affordable, which came up in questions today. Seamlessly coordinating those transition points, expanding that work-based learning, and then earn while you learn opportunities. It should not be leaving the workforce in order to advance. And then finally, anticipating the needs of critical industries, the future of work, and then support the alignment of the credential programs to meet those needs.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson.
So before we move on to the getting involved piece where we roll up your sleeves, you know, the Rocky Mountain Partnership is the coalition of the committed. So would like to say hello to Commissioner Steve Odorizio, who is joining us today. Thank you, Commissioner. So what's next? How do we move from talk to action, getting involved? So the very first thing the partnership is asking you to do is to sign up to receive the Equitable Hiring Toolkit. You know, and as County Manager Raymond Gonzalez said, this is the opportunity for us to really walk the talk. Follow Rocky Mountain Partnership on social media. We have all of the handles, so please check us out so you can get up-to-date updates and we can continue the conversation in this really crucial dialogue. Visit our website to learn more about how you can get involved and join the movement. So last but not least, we really, again, this partnership is the coalition of the committed. We are honored to have the time and the talent of the partners here today. So check out what will you do in the next week to begin this work. So share your answer in the chat. That's first. And then in the spirit of continuous improvement, we would invite you to take this 30-second survey to help us improve for future sessions. So with that, we are finished for today. So please put in the chat what you'll be doing to begin this work in the next week. And please take our 30-second feedback survey. And thank you again for being here. Kudos to the team. Well done, team.